Hello and welcome to another episode of Prime Life Podcast. We are recording on a lovely Friday afternoon. It is raining cats and dogs, but all that being said, we're excited to be here. Joseph, how are you?
I am good. I'm dry at the moment, so that's a good sign. But yes, it's been nonstop
Yeah,
raining.
that is so true. Our other co-host, Paul, is not with us today. He's traveling, and he had sent me a message saying that he got in his canoe and he was able to row to the airport. So I know New York is having quite a time with this. Hopefully we won't see the same levels here in Connecticut. But Mary, how are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm dry, as Joseph said, but I was out in the raininess. But I'm like, well, I'm not made of sugar, so I won't melt. Hopefully, I'm not like the Wicked Witch of the West, where I will disappear. So I think I'm good. Thanks for asking,
That's
Laura.
hysterical. I'm going to have that vision in my head for quite some time now. On that note, do you mind doing our introduction today? We have a very interesting guest, and I'm excited to jump right in.
I am as well. Thanks, Laura. Today we have Laurie Hirsch Schulz. She is the owner and founder of LHS Coaching. She launched that in 2018, following a 20-year career in marketing and strategy leadership. As a transition and transformation coach, she partners with career explorers, soulpreneurs, nonprofit founders who are at a professional inflection point to navigate through change, to clarify and embrace and activate new opportunities. So I love that. And I'm reading right from what Laurie gave me, and I love it so eloquently said. Laurie coaches at the intersection of work and life. Laurie, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you do what you do.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm in New York, just north of New York City, and the weather here is terrible as well. I was just telling Joseph that my roof seems to have sprung a teeny tiny little leak. So, yeah, it's pretty bad here. But yes, I am the owner and founder of LHS Coaching. I call myself a transition coach. And I'm really interested in this idea of inflection points. So those points in time when it could be big things or little things, but when you realize that, or there's an opportunity to make a change. And inflection points can be anything from experiencing stress that could be related to your job. It could be a terrible boss. It could be reaching retirement age, or people all around you beginning to retire and saying to you, "Hey." All right, or your spouse saying to you, "Hey, I'm ready to retire. What about you?" I have a number of clients who are seeing people retire all around them, and they're like, "Well, I'm not quite sure if I'm really ready yet, but maybe I don't want to work the way I worked anymore." Or it could be an empty nest. Actually, both of my girls left at the same time in September, so it's that's an inflection point too. So I'm really interested in those points of inflection and being really purposeful about exploring where do you want to go next and what does that look like. So that's the kind of work that I do. Like you said, I do a lot of work with people who are thinking about their careers. But I also work with people who are small business owners to think about, well, what do I want to do with this business next? I have a client who was at a point with her business where she knew she wanted to retire in about 5 years. And so the question for her was, do I start scaling back or do I start growing so that I can sell my business? And, and through the work through some of the work that we did, that she got some clarity that she was ready to start growing her business. It had been successful. She was a single mom. She had raised her daughter on her own, successful business. And she saw that actually now her daughter had left, she had more time. With the view that she could actually sell her business. So that's what I do is I work with people to really get the clarity of where they want to go next. And I'll just say one more thing. You talked about that intersection of life and work. I was listening to another coach yesterday on a call that I was on, and she said, all coaches are life coaches to a certain degree. And I actually am not, I don't generally call myself a life coach, but I think it's really powerful when you think about life and work together, because in order for it to all go well, your life should influence your work, and your work should be a reflection of what your life goals are. So, or what your life priorities are. So that's why I say, I have a bias toward the more of the work side of things, but I think it's really, really important to think about, and I'll talk a little bit about your personal compass and things like that, but I'll pause there. But that's why I say the intersection of life and work, because I think it's really important to be really thoughtful and purposeful and respectful of what it is that your priorities are, and then let those influence and help guide the work side of your life.
I find that to be fascinating because, I think I can speak for Joseph, Mary, and I, where we are very much involved in things outside of our traditional jobs, if you will, that reflect both the work that we do, but also where we are and who we are within our own lives. So when people come to you, this is more of a curiosity question, and they're at that transition point and they're looking for guidance, they're looking to work through this, do you generally find that they come from one of only a few places? So you mentioned, is it the transition where they're looking to either grow or close? Is it the transition of, I don't know if I should be doing this type of work anymore or any type of work anymore? Do you find any commonalities, or is it true to each individual person having their own path and therefore every single instance is unique?
Well, I before I answer that question, I want to clarify one thing because you kind of mentioned it. When I talk about work, I actually don't just mean the work that you get paid for. There are a lot of people who are community leaders, who are volunteers, I myself am a president of a board, of a nonprofit board. I don't get paid for that, but let me tell you, I'm working like 10, 15 hours a week on that job. So work is what I consider work to be a very broad description of what work is. So just so that we have that in mind when we're talking about work. Regarding where my clients come from, or what their point of view is, it's generally they all come with thinking they know what they need to change. Like they know that they're at an inflection point and they think they need to make a change. Or they know they need to make a change and they think they know what that is. My boss is terrible. I've got to get out of this place. Everybody is retiring. What should I be retiring to? So I want to change jobs, but I'm not sure what that is. Or there's a variety of things that they think that they want to do. But part of that work, I referenced a little bit, this developing your inner compass. I start every coaching engagement developing an inner compass with my clients. And what that means is, let's spend a little bit of time being really clear. What are your values, your non-negotiable values, the things that are so important, the top 5? And people will look at this list and they're like, oh, well, 20 of them spoke to me. It's like, no, what are the top 5? What is, sometimes I'll talk about like, what is your purpose in life, depending on, whether that resonates with them, or what's your mission? Like, let's get that defined. What gives you energy? I mean, just because you're good at something doesn't mean that it energizes you and lights you up. So what gives you energy and what drains your energy? And then, we also talk about what I call your superpowers. So what are your superpowers? Meaning your capabilities. What are the things that you're really good at? Those are the developed skills that you have through work, through education, through experience. But there's also those innate traits. So what makes you unique in the way that you do the work that you do? I mean, you can be an accountant, but you can be the way that you go about it can be very unique. I mean, you could be the way you make connections with people, or the way that, or that you come with a creative mindset and you think about, not to say that you're doing creative accounting, but you look at how do you collaboratively and creatively problem solve. So there's different ways to explore what your superpowers are. So once you have that compass, and particularly start talking about the values, then we take a step back and we'll say, okay, you came to me. You started this coaching engagement with the goal of figuring out where you want to go next. And maybe it's, I need to leave this job, and let's now clarify what your question is. What are you really trying to solve for? And usually when we start talking about what are you trying to solve for with the framework of that compass, it usually evolves. So an example is I had a client who wanted to leave. She was a teacher, and she wanted to leave her job because it was like post-COVID, tough job being a teacher, high school teacher, really stressful. And but through our initial work that we did, she realized that it wasn't just about leaving the job. She lived in New York City. It was really in an apartment with a family. It was really complicated. Even going grocery shopping is complicated in New York City. And, so there was just that added stress of navigating the city, even though like she had an apartment in New York City. People who live in New York don't like to give up their apartments. But realizing that there was so much complexity in her life, she realized that it wasn't just the job. And actually, they sold their apartment and they moved to the suburbs. Another example, actually, that may resonate more with your folks is I had another client who I worked with earlier this year who also need to leave my job, working too many hours. And through that compass work and really digging into what was going on, she realized, wait a minute, it's not just the job. My youngest is going to college this year. So empty nest. My dog is dying. So I mean, that's a stressful situation. So she realized that there was a lot of other. She's like, wait a minute, it's not just about my work. My whole life is in this transition point. She also realized, she used to be. Humor was one of her top values. And she said, wait a minute, I can't even remember the last time I laughed. Like there was a lot going, and it's not therapy. Coaching is not therapy. And we can talk about that if you want, but it's taking like where you are right now and then guiding where you want to go moving forward. And so you ask like, where do they come from? Usually they come from a very similar spot. They usually come from, I need to change my job, or I need to think about, I want to retire, and what does that look like? But once we do that work, they get that clarity and the questions become much tighter. And what are you trying to solve for becomes much tighter. And then we can move forward from there.
You covered a lot of different ground over there just now. So a couple of thoughts, a couple of comments, and maybe there'll be a question in here. We'll see. So we talked about the inflection point. I think retirement is probably going to be a significant amount of change in anyone's life. However, a lot of people talk about retirement as sort of the end, right? It could just be the beginning of something new and different. So when we talk about change, it could just be changing from, maybe a 9-to-5 job to a passion job, or starting a business that you fall in love with. So maybe you could talk about that in a second, but I jotted this down. I've done some life coaching, business coaching, call it what you want. There is in my mind, a fine line between coaching and therapy. And since you just brought it up, maybe you could talk about that as well. Just illustrate or define how, the differences between the two. Because it does feel the same. There's a similar feeling when you go through the process.
And we'll get that answer after a brief word from our commercial sponsors.
NASA is always working harder to be your carrier of choice. We offer insurance products that can help you meet your retirement goals, such as protecting your savings, securing lifetime income, or paying for healthcare costs. We're dedicated to providing best-in-class service and are keeping things simple, and we'll have your back. We have around 400,000 policyholders and contract holders and have been doing this for a long time, 170 years, but we remain humble enough to always try to improve. For more information, visit nfg.com. Nassau insurance products are issued by Nassau Life and Annuity Company of Hartford, Connecticut, Nassau Life Insurance Company, East Greenbush, New York, or Nassau Life Insurance Company of Kansas, Overland Park, Kansas. Subsidiaries of Nassau Financial Group. Products are not available in all areas. Policyholder counts are for all Nassau companies as of September 30th, 2022, and are subject to change.
Coverite is the first digital concierge health insurance platform focused on Medicare. Their mission is to make Medicare more transparent and accessible for America's 60 million Medicare beneficiaries. By simplifying a traditionally confusing and complex decision, Coverite delivers a simple, seamless, and hassle-free plan selection and enrollment experience. Try the Coverite platform and see for yourself why they've been referred to as the TurboTax for Medicare. Visit coverite.com/podcast to learn more.
So, all right, I like both of those. So I'll start with the therapy and coaching one. First of all, I think it's really interesting, but many of my clients also see or have seen therapists. And in fact, I have a number of therapists who actually refer their clients to me. The way that I view it, first of all, I mean, therapists have gone through, I'm certified as a coach, but therapists have gone through, and I have 25 years of experience in corporate, being a manager of big teams and a leader that support my coaching. But therapists, that's what they go to school for, and I would never venture in that area. I think where the difference is that, to me, where my focus is, yes, we do look backwards because that's your frame of reference, but we don't spend a lot of time there. It's really just to understand your perspective and where you're coming from. So we're not talking about the things that may have shaped you or influenced you, or or guiding your emotions and things like that. So we acknowledge that. And actually, one of my favorite questions is, going back to, because we talk about gremlins, I don't want to get, like that inner critic, right? And going back to and usually the inner critic says the same thing over and over again. And when did that inner critic start talking to you?
That inner critic's a pain in the ass.
That inner critic is such a pain in the ass. But yes, that's going back in time because that's the frame of reference that you're coming from. But I use that question to then launch into, well, what if that inner critic, how do we reframe that? And what if that inner critic became your cheerleader for moving forward? And if you were to turn that, because the inner critic is something that's developed, and now it sounds really poppy and therapeutic, but the inner critic, as I understand it, is developed to protect you from things when you were a kid and when you were younger. Well, you don't really need that protection anymore. So what if you turn it on your head? If that inner critic is saying, you're not smart enough, and all of a sudden that inner critic is saying, you totally have this. You are really, just turn it on its head. You are smart enough. And then you use that to move forward. So I really view coaching as you take that, what's made you who you are and that perspective, but you use that to guide you forward and to help to be and enable you to reframe things that might be standing in your way, but all in service of moving forward. Does that make sense? I see nodding, so I'm going to say, yeah. I mean, I think there is a little bit of it's a little bit gray, but I am always super, super focused on that forward motion. Where do you want to go next? How do you, what's your vision of the future? What are your goals? And let's put together a plan to get there. Not so much, and if something's holding you back, well, then again, let's reframe that. Is there another way to think about it? You have this assumption about, I can't get hired because I'm too old. Well, how do we reframe that assumption? And let's look at that a different way. And let's look at your capabilities and what you bring to, and let's, that's not helpful. So so it's in service of moving forward. Can I answer that retirement question? Because I love that question. Retirement is such a funny word. Actually, I had a meeting earlier today with someone, and he works part-time. He's owned a couple different businesses. He was an entrepreneur. He'd worked in corporate for a while, and he has his own business now, and he does business consulting, and he works part-time. And I said to him, I hate to even ask you this. Do you consider yourself to be semi-retired? And he says, I hate that word. He's like, I don't know. He's like, no, because so I think, for some people, retirement is a word that they have, that they embrace. But for many people, I mean, for this guy, he when he's not working, he has a wood shop, and he's like developed an art and a craft, and he's in his wood shop doing lathing. I think that's the word. So I think that that's actually one of the reasons. I mean, that's one of the things that might come up for us in like some of that inner compass work is like, what's your relationship with retirement? And just because you stopped working as you've worked before doesn't mean that, what is it? So what do you want to do with that next? I think, one of the things that I hear from a lot of people who are about to retire or transition from the way they used to work, they've always worked, is that open time is so intimidating, like that unstructured time. I always share this story that when I left the corporate world after over 20 years in 2017. And I took about a year off. I called it my reboot year. And during my reboot year, I actually got my coaching certification, and I spent a lot of time figuring out what do I want to do next. But it was pre-COVID, and I had spent 20 plus years working full time, traveling 20% of the time, raising 2 kids, being a wife, et cetera and so forth. And all of a sudden I was at home, and I would walk around the block. This is pre-COVID. And I would be like, at like 11 o'clock in the morning, and I would think to myself, what is everyone thinking about me? I'm just walking around the block. They're probably, why isn't she at work? What is she doing? And how silly is that? Now during COVID, I mean, everybody takes, more and more people are working from home, but it's these beliefs that you have about yourself and the way that you've always been. It's hard to break away from that. So I think retirement is a tough word, and it's weighty. And for some people, it's freedom. One of my clients was talking about his sister. He said, she feels free. He said, when I hear that word, it freaks me out and it makes me really super anxious. That's not what I want. So it's, it's different for different people.
I think that's a great answer, and I totally agree. And I'm one of those people, if I hear retirement, it freaks me out. But I want to take us in another direction, something that you had shared in your questions about change, because I love this topic. And I am a fan of Tony Robbins. I know some are not. And this is a quote that actually I rebooted my life many years ago. I just rebooted it a couple years ago. I'm always rebooting. Change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. I heard that many years ago. It stopped me in my tracks. I was on a run, and I just stopped, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is exactly how I'm feeling. And I did at that point make a change. It was a change to go into another business. I started my career as an entrepreneur, and I had a reboot. Last week, we had a gentleman come into Nassau, Todd Durkin. He was fabulous. He was an inspirational coach, and he also did we did some fitness training with him. And something he said, a couple things he said, just again rebooted my mind, which I needed. So, a couple questions within this. So, talk about change, how you perceive it, and how you advise, and also. Do you find that people have shared with you, your clients, that, every so often, they're pausing and they're rethinking, where they are, where they want to go, and et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, that Tony Robbins quote is a good one. I was just writing a little blog posting earlier today, and I was using that metaphor of the frog in the pot of water. I know it's a little gruesome, but a frog in a pot of water over a hot stove just stays there until it gets hotter and hotter and hotter until it actually, because it doesn't realize how hot it's gotten until it's actually almost too late, until it realizes, wait a minute, I've got to get out of here. And I think change is a little bit the same. It's like become so accustomed to the way things are. I say that a lot of people, I do something, I say to a lot of my clients are kind of at that, yeah, it's okay. How are things going? Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. well, do we really have to settle for okay? I mean, that's not everybody, but do we have to settle for okay? So, I mean, there's a lot of things that make people kind of avoid change. I mean, it's comfortable just to be where you are. There's lack of clarity. There's overwhelm. I have so many clients who'll come to me and say, I'm here and I want to go all the way over there. And so since I want to go all the way over there, that's like, I mean, I had a client who is actually, she's preparing to retire from the job that she's in. She's an executive for a healthcare center. And she's like, you know what? I'm thinking I want to be a motivational speaker. Well, boy, if you're like here, and I'm not saying she was being unreasonable. I'm just saying, but if that's where you are and you want to go all the way to there, that feels really big. So that can be really overwhelming. It might be what's holding people up: procrastination, self-doubt. We just talked about that inner critic. So all of those things. So I think you asked me, how do you move forward?
What advice do you give people when they are obviously fearing change, or just like what I shared with you, Tony Robbins, when the pain of not changing sort of exceeds, and they're just like, I've got to do something. And the other thing you kind of touched upon that I was thinking of a second ago, regards to change, but also regards to, getting out of your comfort zone, because do you advise people baby steps? Because you just gave a great example of someone that, your healthcare executive who wants to be a motivational speaker. And that's quite a big of a distance to get from there to there. Not that it's impossible, but,
and you know what, actually she had, So yes and yes, actually. So some of the work that I do is with people to think really outside the box. And I have some tools that I use to do that. Like, let's go a little crazy. That gal that I mentioned who said, let's move their whole family to outside the city. One of the ways she got there is because through our work, I said, we talked about what would she do if she wasn't scared? And she said, I would move my whole family to Paris. Now, maybe someday she will move her whole family to Paris. But that clicked this, wait a minute, I can move my whole family. Maybe I don't move to Paris, but I can move to, I can move out of the city. And so it's this, so thinking outside the box can help inform where you want to go. And then I'm a big believer in, you say baby steps. Yes, baby steps are iterating forward, because it's experimenting. How do you experiment step by step by step? And that woman that I just mentioned who talked about doing motivational speaking, she's actually doing an adjunct professor. She's teaching a program at the local community college. So and she's taking, and she actually has some really fabulous stories, and she's got a great background. So this idea of motivational speaker, like, okay, I said that out loud and wow, maybe that's a little crazy, but it's informing then, let's do some experimentation. So she's still working full time, and she's doing this 1 night a week program at a local community college, using a lot of her stories and experience that she has to help onboard new students into the community college. And that in itself is, professors can be incredible motivational speakers. So it's a yes and yes. It's like, yes, think out of the box, because that can help you inform, and then bring it back in and think about, how do you iterate toward that goal? And you know what, while you're iterating, you're going to learn things too, right? And so all of a sudden, maybe it's not motivational speaker, maybe it's something along those lines. Maybe it's writing a book, or maybe it's, I don't know what that is, but that iterating helps you figure out like what's working and what's not working, and then build on it. I mentioned in my notes to you all, this idea of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. That growth mindset, and being able to actually, one of the things I love about this idea of growth mindset is having failure immunity. So nothing is being immune to failure. Didn't work. All right. What did I learn from that? What did I gain from that? And let's keep going and build from it.
Yeah, I love that. I love to I don't know that I've ever heard anyone say I love to fail, but that whole growth forward, I appreciate it in a lot of ways. And I think that it's very relevant for this type of conversation. And in the notes you provided, we talked about some of the strategies for jumpstarting and navigating. So let's pretend that I'm at a pivotal point and I'm ready to make a change. We've gotten down to, my personal compass. We understand it. We're past that point and we understand that there's, a change that's going to take place. Can you provide one or two of your favorite strategies for that jumpstart? Like, what's going to get me off this wooden stool in my kitchen to do that first step of the thing that we've determined is right for me?
Now an ad from one of our sponsors. Remember when you could trust the news? Well, then check out Walter. Walter is the free, no-nonsense newsletter for grown-ups that comes to your inbox 3 times a week. From current trends, aging in place, travel, retirement, and everything in between, including a dash of pop culture trivia and throwbacks, Walter is a great way to start your mornings and to stay informed. Oh, and did we mention that it's free? Check us out at thisiswalter.com. Get smart. Get Walter.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first step probably is just recognizing when it's time to change. I mean, sometimes it's hard even to know when it's time to make a change. So that's and listening to it actually, and paying attention, because I think we all are on these, we're all on the wheel and we're just going and going. So acknowledging that it's time to change and not just admiring it is one of the first pieces of it. And then it's really just try something. Even if when I say experimentation, okay, becoming an adjunct professor, is a big experiment. But experiments can be as much as picking up the phone and having a curiosity conversation with somebody, reaching out to them through your network, or having coffee with someone, or, so that's an experimentation. What are you doing? What's interesting about what you're doing? How did you get there? That's a really simple one. It can be taking on, taking a trip. Like when one of my clients, she looked at retirement and she's like, I love my job. And yet everyone my age is leaving the company and all of my friends are retiring. So it's starting within her own life to just do other things besides work. So taking a vacation, volunteering doing a volunteer, just doing something. I mean, it's just taking that first step, because then you start thinking differently about what you're doing. I talked about conversations way back when I graduated from college, and I worked for a marketing communications agency for 4 years. And I don't know why, I never had this thought that I was going to go to graduate school. And I went out for dinner on a date with some guy that I wasn't that interested in. But we were talking about my work, and he just said one thing that all of a sudden, and I'm sure we've all had these experiences. He's like, why don't you get your MBA? And I was like, oh, why don't I get my MBA? And that triggered an entire new path for me. So that's why I say experimentation and listening. Be listen and be willing to take even little steps. So I guess, Laura, it's not dramatic. It's really more about listening to yourself, knowing yourself, listening to the signs, paying attention to the signs. Are you bored? Are you bored at work? Do you keep thinking about how great things used to be in the beginning of your job, and now it's not so good? So whatever those are, and actually doing something about it, even if it's little. I had an old CEO of Kraft who I used to work with. He talked about backward mentoring, having mentoring conversations with people who are younger than you. I mean, just any of that can ignite a change for you. It's like, what's that spark? I guess it's like let those get sparked and then do something with that spark.
So I want to get one question here before we run out of time. What's the one piece of advice you would give someone who's thinking they may need a coach? What should they look for? What should they consider?
What should they look for in a coach? Yeah. I think, a coach's job is really to listen. It's actually, in some ways you could say the coaching job is easy because we don't do the talking. We do the listening and the, and helping to guide toward insights. So is the coach that you're talking to, are they listening to you? Are they pulling? That's not, are they able to partner? And I consider my work to be a partnership and a collaboration. So are they partnering with you? Are they collaborating with you to be able to help you draw insights and action plans forward that are really meaningful and authentic to you and reflect who you are? So I think some of it is that chemistry. Some of it I think is experience. I think, I work with people who, people come to me because I have a lot of corporate experience. I've been a hiring manager. So that perspective, I've been a hiring manager. I've done a lot of corporate mentoring. So I do leadership coaching as well. But I think ultimately it's about, does it feel like it's good chemistry? Are they really good listeners? And do they have, I use what we've been talking about today, I call your map your next move process. It doesn't matter what you call it, but do they have clarity on how they're actually going to get you from here to there? And actually the last thing that I will say about that is, are they focused on not just admiring the issues, but actually helping you, being really clear on what you want to achieve out of that coaching and keep reconnecting with you over and over? Are they helping you to clarify what you want, how you want to, what you want out of the coaching, and being really clear that it's actionable and that you are leaving that coaching relationship with an action plan in place to be able to achieve what you want to achieve, even if you're not entirely clear on it when you first start. But a coach who's is a great listener and is action oriented.
So, Laurie, before Laura asks the last question, what are your final thoughts for our audience? Like, can you give them a couple of takeaways that they could take action on, that are general, that you would want to say to an individual who's thinking about starting to go to a coach, or just, again, change or life transition, in addition to how you answered Joseph's question?
Yeah, I would say that developing, first of all, listen to yourself, pay attention to change. Don't just settle for okay. It can be fun to explore change. So get that energy. Develop your personal compass. Be really, take a pause. Give yourself the gift of a pause. Take a couple of breaths, even if it's like a long weekend. It's working with a coach, but it can also be just taking some time to do some time to do some journaling about. I led a vision board workshop last week, thinking about what your vision of the future may be. What is it that you need? And starting to build out that personal compass and being really purposeful about that. Be a little brave and experiment. Do one thing, commit to yourself to trying one thing differently once a week, or once or twice a month, and learn from that. I think that those are to navigate through change. I think that that's where you're going to be the most successful, is because you'll just gain that much more information from that iteration. Don't think that a change needs to be so extremely dramatic. A change can be something that you slowly move toward. And then all of a sudden you look back and you say, look where I came from. That was pretty huge, but it didn't feel so significant.
There's been so much to the conversation in this short amount of time that I mean, we're just going to have you back on again because there's so much more that I want to, we want to dive into here. But as we wrap today's conversation, you've laid out a lot of how you help others and how you help guide them and help them make decisions within their own paths. But I'd like to know, what is your why? Why do you get up every morning and do the work that you do?
Oh, thanks for asking me that question, Laura. That's a great question. My why, and it actually really this is the beauty of having a personal compass, is that it can help you figure out what's in and what's out. Like you can be much more defining. So my personal why is that I want to be a spark that ignites people and communities' powers. So as a coach, my why is I want to be able to spark people's individual powers to be able to propel them forward to new opportunities and to change and to help them feel empowered. As a spark, that's why I do the nonprofit work that I do, because it's very community oriented. And we work with teens in the community to, I won't go into, but I believe that my work and the work that we do can be sparks for teens to become community leaders and to actually influence the communities that they're in. So that's really my spark is my why is to be a spark that ignites, that can help ignite change in others, whether they're individuals or communities. And that really guides what I choose to do and what I don't choose to do. A year ago, before I took on this role as president of the board for this nonprofit, I actually was very purposeful, and I was leading a women's networking group. I pulled back from that. Like I was really purposeful, even though it was something that I really loved, and it was aligned with my why. But there's only so many things you can do. And that you can be really purposeful in deciding what do you choose to do and what do you choose to not do. So that's my
I love
why.
it. And there's a lot of power in that. Sometimes people don't realize when they are givers, speaking from my own thoughts here, when you like to give time, talent, treasure, you notice that you give a lot and frequently, and then you thin yourself out. So there's so much power in understanding that. So I thank you for sharing that with us today. As we get to the top of the time here, I just want to ask Joseph and Mary, any final thoughts or reflections you'd like to share? Joseph, let's start with you.
Well, we mentioned gremlins, so I'm just going to say
Jetsons, gremlins.
It's raining out, so don't get those gremlins wet. I'll leave it at that. Leave with a little bit of a
Great,
joke.
Mary.
I'm not as jokestery, but I love that, Joseph, that you are. I just would love people to think about, don't be afraid to make a change, because I know I asked the question when we had Todd Durkin at Nassau. I asked that question, like, what do you suggest when you're fearing to do something? And he suggested, like, run toward it, don't run away from it. So, find coaches like Laurie that you can know, like, and trust, that can help guide you, but certainly don't be afraid of change.
I love it. And Laurie, if people want to reach out to learn more about the work that you do or potentially partner with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to do is just email me. It's Laurie, Laurie, at LHScoaching.
That's great. Thank you so much. We'll put that and many more links in the show notes. So we thank everyone for your time today to join us to listen to this episode. Please feel free to rate, review, leave us comments, share the links with your friends. And we look forward to next week's episode of the Prime Life Podcast. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Remember to subscribe to the Prime Life Podcast anywhere you find podcasts. You can find all of our episodes, contact information, and more on our website, primelifepodcast.com. Stay connected with us. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok.